What's up, guys? Koma here, and today I got something a bit more different once again within Destiny 2. So I was recently asked the question, how exactly do you build a character, a class, and what exactly are you looking for when you're doing a build? So I kind of want to go over kind of just what I know and how to kind of understand what you're building. So first of all, number one, you can pick whatever class you want. Builds really don't matter in terms of what class you are. It would really just depend on what weapon you're running and what armor exotic you're running. So, um, first of all, I want to go here and strip all my mods. Therefore, you can get an understanding of what our gear is looking like at base. Alright, now there our perks are all completely empty here. Have any perks, any mods, anything like that. Go ahead and go to our artifact here, and we'll also reset our artifact. Boom, our artifact is all reset. We are now kind of just base guardian. We don't have anything to really go off of. And we are currently looking for what we are going to do first. So first of all, I think armor is very important. As you can kind of see, I kind of got my stats all over the place. Here are my base stats, and you might notice I have a ton into resilience. As a Titan, this is always useful because a Titan's resilience will always determine their barricade cooldown. But a mobility stat on a Hunter will determine your evade or dodge cooldown, and recovery on a Warlock will depend on your Rift cooldown. So these three perks here are very dependent class-wise, but Discipline is your grenade cooldown, Intellect is your super cooldown, and your Strength is a melee-based cooldown. So your abilities will determine how long these cooldowns are. When you go into your subclass menu, you'll notice that your Vortex Grenade has a base cooldown of 232 seconds. But by default, that will mean my Discipline mod, and if I will go over to it, 138 ability cooldown, but at tier 9 it'll be, sorry, 1 minute 38, but at a tier 9 grenade ability cooldown it'll have a minute and 27. Now, this will depend on what your grenade is, because the grenades all have different recharge abilities. So if I were to swap to Scatter Grenade, which I believe is the lowest in cooldown, a minute 45, you notice now it goes down to a minute at tier 9. But how do you get these base stats, high enough on your gear and rolled correctly enough? Because you'll notice that my arms have 20 resilience, 16 discipline, and 14 strength. My helm is 28 resilience and 21 discipline, and then the rest of the stats are kind of everywhere. But how do we get that? Well, for one, you can come to the helm if you have the seasonal access, and you can focus gear. So you can go in here and you can focus all this armor here for simply 2 engrams and 1,000 glimmer. These are supposed to be high stat armor as long as you have the upgrade here, I believe. Right here. Defiant armor focusing your defiant engrams to high stat seasonal armor, but it requires that armor in your collection. As long as you focus one of these engrams, so say, for example, I grab the boots right now, and I go over my inventory, you'll notice it's a 61 stat roll. It's got really lucky with that, with the intellect and resilience. That's a very good piece of armor if you're looking for resilience intellect, but typically what people look for the most, unless it's PvP based, you want to look for resilience or discipline, or resilience or strength. If you don't have access to the war table upgrades, which I'm completely unsure if players that are free to play have access to any of this, maybe someone can correct me in the comments. But if you don't have access to any of this, you can pretty much go do any one of the dungeons if you have access to any of the dungeons. So for example, one of the best dungeons and probably the cheapest you can get your hands on is Shattered Throne. Mainly because what you want this to do is you want Shattered Throne to be on the rotation for the dungeon, meaning that you can farm this and you can basically go to the last checkpoint and farm out the final boss to essentially just mass drop armor, basically. The most efficient one that we know of would definitely be the one on the moon, if I can find the moon on my director. Pit of Heresy, which is currently on rotation, and I've seen a ton of people farming this for hard stat roll, so that's another good alternative when it's on rotation. So how do you guarantee a stat? Because you'll notice that I got lucky enough with a stat roll on the boots earlier that were 17 resilience and 20 intellect. Well, once you get up to a certain level, I think within your guardian ranks, you do get access to the ghost mods, I believe, unless that's just something that now drops randomly. Okay, I believe it was the threats and surges, which says requires 3 activity completions. I believe this was the one that handed out your mods. Unfortunately, it doesn't say it anymore, but yeah, that is generally what you're gonna have to finish up for. I believe the armor mods. I'm completely unsure if these hand out the ghost mods or the weapon mods. But when you have the ghost mods, you can go into your ghost and make sure it's leveled to at least 2 or 3. And then you'll have this mod slot. I believe it's the 3rd mod slot if it's going to load. And you'll have, there's also 4. You'll have these armor mods here. So you have strength armory, which guarantees a armor piece of a minimum of 10 strength and more likely to drop in higher strength. So this goes for each and every stat. You can focus and guarantee 10 into every stat. And so I'm running resilience because resilience is a very important stat. I will say this, resilience is good because it increases your total damage reduction. So you want to stack into this as much as you can, especially if you're on a Titan. But on a Warlock or a Hunter, it's very selective. You can get it about 7, 8, and you should be fine. But specifically, I always run with this. So that is typically how you're going to get your gear and how you're going to make sure you're guaranteeing your armor by stat roll. So what do we do first? We have our stats that we want, but what exactly are we going to spec into? Well, it very depends on what you're going to spec into. I think for the sake of the video, I'm going to spec into Sunshot. Now, Sunshot is a very unique hand cannon. It is the only 150 hand cannon in the game. So it is very unique, and the intrinsic reads, this weapon fires explosive rounds and highlights targets that take damage from Sunshot, and it has the Sunblast perk, which targets killed with the Sunshot explode into solar energy. Now, it doesn't state this here, but this now spreads Scorch to enemies, which is a Solar 3.0 term. And if we go over to Solar 3.0, you'll notice that Scorch here at the right side of my screen says the target is singed by destructive solar light, taking damage over time. Scorch damage increases as the Scorch accumulates more Scorch stacks. After enough Scorch stacks are applied, the target will ignite. And then it says ignition below it, which is solar explosion, which deals damage in an area around the target and stuns unstoppable champions. So now we can understand what Scorch does. Now, how exactly are we going to utilize Sunshot? Well, I also have the Catalyst, which gives me range and stability, meaning that this thing is pretty dangerous at a decent range. Can't put a mod on it, which is completely fine. So we're going to head over to my Solar Subclass, and we're going to figure out how we can utilize Scorch. So we see here that we have our Fragments here. Aspects, really you can run whatever you want here, but for the sake of my role, what I'm running Sol Invictus, where if I defeat a Scorched opponent, that would mean that I will basically spawn a Sunspot, which if I walk through a Sunspot, that means my abilities generate faster, my super drains more slowly, but I also get Restoration when entering a Sunspot. And the next I have Roaring Flames, where each final blow with a solar ability or ignition increase the damage of your solar abilities. It stacks up to 3 times. So now we got to figure out how we're going to utilize the Scorch. So we can come through here and we can look through the fragments. If you don't have any of these fragments, by the way, you go to Ikora in the tower and you pick up pretty much any fragment that you think is useful within your arsenal. I'm sure I'll have kind of footage up right now to kind of tell you what or show you how that looks, and you can buy everything on your own terms, so you can really figure out what you're. So going through our fragments, let's see what I can have here. So we're gonna try to utilize Scorch as much as we physically can. Let's see. Defeating Scorch targets grants a melee energy and creates a fire spurt. Now that's extremely useful because that would mean that we can now spec into our melee. So that would mean we have our throwing hammer. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw that on real quick. Let's see. And it applies Scorch or applies more Scorch to targets. Generally, there is little you can do with Scorch, I believe. Mainly everything is going to... Oh, there's that one. Ember Singeing. Class ability regenerates faster when you scorch targets. Also not bad. But generally, we've also noticed that we're on Solar Subclass. So what can we do just with the Solar Subclass? Like, what if we're running Sunshot, but we don't need Sunshot? We can go ahead and build into the fire bolts, because now we can go to the artifact, and you'll notice that we have a ton of artifact perks here. All these artifact perks now apply passively to your guardian, so you can unlock whatever you want and reset it at any time. And we're going to go ahead and pick up Anti-Barrier Pulse, Unstoppable Scout, and Overload SMG, because I just generally think those are the best you can pick up. We're going to go do Authorized Mods Solar, Authorized Mods Grenades. We're going to pick up Solar Surge. We're collecting a Fire Sprite, gives us an Armor Charge, which we will go over Armor Charge later. And let's see, what else could we... We'll go ahead and pick up Void too. And then we're going to pick up Flare Up. And we can go ahead and just pick up Bricks from Beyond and Volatile Flow. Really won't matter here. And we're going to want Rain of Fire Bolts, and I'm just going to go Void Weapon Channeling because that's what I had before. So now, if we go back, or if you stay in this menu, you want to make sure that you're reading these Flared Up and Rain of Fire Bolts, where Firebolt Grenades apply more Scorch stacks, dealing a damaging combatant with a Firebolt spawns a Fire Sprite. So once we also have that Fire Sprite, we'll gain an Armor Charge if we pick it up. Explain more later. And when you have Firebolt Grenades equipped, you have a second Grenade Charge. Very useful. So, going back over to our subclass, we will have our fire bolts on, and we'll have our throwing hammer, where we don't need Ember of Resolve. Let's see. Ability recharges. I had on here. Oh, that's right. I had Ember of Blizzard. So we're gonna go ahead and go with Ember of Eruption, where solar ignitions have increased area of effect. Ember of Char, your solar ignition spread to afflicted targets. And also gives you a plus 10 discipline, which means my discipline is now 91. My Ember of Erection actually gives me strength, so that means my melee at all times kind of just generates slower. Ember of Ashes, which applies more Scorch stacks to targets. This means that my Firebolt is more likely to explode a target thanks to Ember of Ashes. And Ember of Blistering, defeating targets with solar ignitions grants grenade energy. That's useful because we're wanting some very high grenade uptime. So everything else here is very selective. Roaring Flames will basically help with solar ability kills, and it stacks up to 3 times, meaning that not only will my Firebolt grenades explode enemies, but it'll also just straight up kill them, which they can explode upon death. So what exactly are we going to do for our armor? Well, there's 2 choices here that I have highlighted. We have Hollow Fire Heart. Go to Inspect Hollow Fire. You'll read the name Sunfire Furnace, where it improves the recharge rate of solar abilities, greatly improves recharge rate when your super is charged, provides a small benefit to airborne effectiveness stat of all weapons. This means that if we utilize just keeping our health, or sorry, our super, our abilities are going to generate much faster. The other alternative would be Heart of Inmost Light. Heart of Inmost Light basically has been one of the top exotics that a lot of people have been running recently, especially with Arc Titan. But I don't find it that well. A lot of people use it for Void as well, but I don't find it that bad on Solar, where it reads using an ability, whether or not that's Grenade, Melee, or Barricade, empowers the other two abilities. Empowered means abilities have faster regen, Melees and Grenades do more damage, and Barricades have more hit points. So this is very useful. So again, we're gonna have uptime for our abilities. Each one of these will generally work completely fine. If you're not very decisive between these two and say that you just kind of want more survivability, Lorelei Splendor Helm will work perfectly. Now, specifically, if you're wanting a good roll of any one of these exotics, specifically Lorelei, where it says when you're critically wounded, full class ability energy, or when you cast a barricade, creates a sunspot at the location and has improved restoration effect. Now, if you're wanting Lorelei specifically, or if you're wanting to really figure out a good way to get a good roll on any of these Heart of Inmost Lights or Heart, your best choice would be a Legend Lost Sector. Now, a Legend Lost Sector does rotate daily, meaning that you'd have to go to a third-party source to figure out where the Legend Lost Sectors are, and they rotate their gear piece completely randomly during the day. I do think there is a pattern, so it can go like arms, I think it was helm, legs, it'll probably be like arms or chest, neck, something. It's a certain specific rotation, so you just kind of gotta wait. But these do have champions in them, so if you do go into them, do be warned and make sure that you are prepared when going into them. You will have the at least 1820 to have a relatively okay run. But if you're under 1820, it'll just kind of be a struggle. So that's how you kind of farm out armor pieces. It will guarantee you the newer armor pieces that you have not acquired yet. So say if I go through every exotic chest piece for Titan, but I haven't got Heart of Inmost Light yet, it will guarantee me a Heart of Inmost Light if that's the last exotic I haven't picked up. So now that we got our exotic, so you'll notice that we have some resilience strength. How exactly are we going to utilize this? Well, we already know this improves the ability regen after we throw our hammer abilities. So we got to figure out what we're going to do with the fire sprites that are coming from our artifact mod. What exactly is going to help us keep our abilities from pretty much stopping. Heart of Inmost Light actually has a 5-second timer on all of the abilities. So we got to figure out a way that we can build our mods into helping our ability uptime. So we got Sunshot, which, by the way, very selective. You can run whatever weapon you want here. And let's go over to our mods. And we're wanting to basically get our grenades, our melee, and even barricade. So for simplicity's sake, and I know a lot of people are probably going to be running Heart of Inmost Light, but we're going to go with Hollow Fire because there's a very cool thing you could do with Hollow Fire. So I'm going to strip all of its mods off too, just so we're starting at base. But if we go back to the helm, there's a very special mod that we can pick up here now for 1 energy, thanks to our artifact authorized mods called Ashes to Assets, where it reads gain bonus super energy on grenade kills. There is also a version for this called Hands-On, which gains bonus super energy on melee kills. So these things are actually very useful. You can throw 2 or even 3 of them on, but I would say 2 because we're going to go with the Solar Siphon to help our primary out and actually generating orbs. And we have an empty mod socket here. So we can throw Discipline. Now, if you're looking for, if you notice here that like my armor has 10 energy, that is because I have every single one of my piece of armors like Masterwork. That's pretty self-explanatory, and pretty much what it does, it just makes it to where I can put a certain amount of mods, specifically 4, and they all have their own little numbers. I have 1, 2, 3, and then this is another 3, so I have 6 of 10. you can kind of see there, I have 6 slots of 10 basically being utilized. But how do you masterwork your armor? As a new player, you generally won't have a whole lot of materials, and you want to understand how you want to get these materials. So the lower ends of the upgrade armor is going to be legendary shards and glimmer, all the way up to, I believe it's 5, where you'll have enhancement cores. And then once it hits 7, then it will require an 2 enhancement prisms. And then it'll cost another 3, and then eventually it will require an ascended shard. And everything is very like random on the way that you get them. If you're running the Legend Lost sectors, like I mentioned before, those Legend Lost sectors will actually give you enhancement prisms and enhancement cores. I believe it's 3 enhancement cores, and at least it guarantees you at least 1 enhancement prism. So as long as you're passively farming for the Legend Lost sectors, you should be completely fine, and you're at least getting up to level 8 or 9 at then your masterwork. Now once you get up to 10, your armor piece will be granting +2 in every stat, meaning that say if you have an armor piece that is 28 and you're wanting to get that up to like 30, that means that masterwork will bump it up to 30. So it's very useful to masterwork all your armor, but it is a very long and tedious grind. If you're just wanting to simply if you have a bunch of hoarded materials and you're wanting to convert, say, like enhancement cores to prisms and prisms to ascendant shards, you can go to Master Royal in the tower and exchange your materials there. But do note that you're probably just better off farming certain activities for these things, because it's just a much better alternative. So continue down to our arms. Let's see, what do we still need? We'll need a little bit of resilience to top off our resilience, so I'm gonna throw in a minor resilience mod. And we're gonna throw in firepower, and we're gonna throw in 2 momentum transfer. So firepower is gonna make it to where my grenade final blows creates an orb of light, so that means if my firebolt by any means basically hits anyone and blows them up and kills them, it will create a orb of power. Momentum transfer just reads causing damage to the grenade reduces your melee cooldown, meaning that if I throw my hammer at something and I bonk them hard enough, it will pretty much give me grenade energy back. Going back to my chest piece, I will throw on a discipline mod here, and that caps out my discipline at 102, so now you can see my resilience and my discipline too. And then for my chest piece things here, these are very selective. You can run whatever you want. If you're running high resilience, you really only need 1 resilience or resistance mod. So for example, I'll just throw on Void just for the hell of it. But you also have these reserve mods, which are a lot more expensive, unless you have the authorized Void, authorized Solar, authorized Strand, or I believe there's another one in there. I can't particularly remember if there was. I think it was Void, Solar, Strand, and then grenades. So you can just throw on, say, if we're running a solar like heavy weapon, we can throw on double solar reserves. But if you want to, you can bump it down to 1 Void. Simple as that. Down to our legs, we're just gonna go ahead and throw on some more strength because we want our hammer back on our mark as well. And then on our legs, we're gonna go innervation. We're gonna go specifically 1 innervation, but you can go 2. But I'm going to go double solar weapon surge, or basically to increase our output of our sunshot. So our sunshot is going to be doing, I believe it's like 17% more damage. So that means this little dinky kind of hard-hitting hand cannon is going to be doing massive amounts of damage upon headshots and the whole 9 yards. And innervation is going to make it where when I pick up an orb of power, it's going to reduce my grenade cooldown. You can do this twice to reduce it more, but I like having a ton of damage into whatever my primary is or whatever my heavy is, so I'm going to be running solar weapon surge. Going into our mark, we're just going to go bomber, and then we're going to be running time dilation. Now, quickly, I want to go over something that you probably have noticed, and new players won't understand, but you'll notice that certain mods have certain colors. Grenade kickstart, melee kickstart, as well as emergency reinforcements, and all utility kickstart and all the finisher mods that are yellow. Well, they are charged with light mods. You'll notice if you read any of them, they consume a charge armor charge. Now some of them just have a passive effect where throwing your grenade, when your grenade energy is fully expended, you gain grenade energy. So this just means it'll refund a portion of your grenade energy. Same goes for melee kickstart, and same goes for utility kickstart. However, some of the other ones makes it to where it consumes a specific amount of armor charge and will only consume a certain amount of armor. So, for example, let's derive a finisher, where when you use a finisher, you gain a portion of energy for your release charge ability, but it consumes 2 stacks of armor charge. Utility kickstart will consume armor charges depending on how many you have, and will give you more energy depending on how many stacks you have. However, if it's a blue effect, this will basically just increase the specific stat pretty much to tier 10. So for example, Bond of Restoration, you gain a bonus to recovery while you have any armor charge. Your armor charge now decays over time. And that will just basically boost up my recovery stat to, I believe it's tier 10. If it's not, then I might have to link a guide. I think what I'm just going to do is I'm going to link, I believe Error did a video on it. So if he wants to understand everything more in depth, I'm going to leave his tutorial and his video to understand everything simpler. So green will pretty much help your charge. So for example, finisher final blows grant you 1 temporary armor charge when you have none. So this would mean that if I get a finisher, it's going to give me an armor charge if I don't have one already. But time dilation helps me keep that armor charge if it's decaying. This pretty much goes for the same idea for stacks on stacks, where it'll picking up an orb of power grants you 1 additional stack of armor charge. And when you pick up an orb of power, as long as you have an armor charge mod on, it'll always grant you the effects of your currently applied mods. But you can't pick up an orb of power and grant an armor charge as long as you, if you don't have any of these mods. So just basically read them through and make sure that you are using them accordingly. And so I believe that is generally it. The last thing to do is to pick out what other weapons we're going to be utilizing in the rest of our build. For the sake of it, I just have Deliverance here. You can throw on whatever else you want to run on this character. But for the sake of it, I'm running Deliverance with Sunshot and Unwavering Duty. And then if we go into here, I'm running Soul Invictus with Roaring Flames, Firebolt with the Bonk Hammer. Then we have our Fragments of Eruption, Char, Ashes, and Blistering. Hollow Fire Heart. And our mod setup. And generally that is pretty much all that you're going to have to do building a character. So I believe it's kind of about time that we go literally anywhere and just kind of mess around with the build. So I'll see you in a moment. Alright, whoa, that's a little chaotic for the start of a Legend Lost sector. So now that we are in a Legend Lost sector, I'm going to show off how this build performs a little bit. Just trying to survive here. You'll notice that this little fire sprite here, I can collect it. Gives me a nice little bump in weapon damage now that I can pick it up. And you'll notice that my Sunshot is also doing plenty of damage, as I kind of need it to. Stuck in this corner a little, aren't I? Sunspot going, so it'll regen me a little bit. Throw that down, make another fire sprite, Sunspot. Toss that down. there. Another explosion. And you'll notice that I just kind of have good uptime on all my abilities here. The problem is I really don't have anti-barriers, so this won't do well. Although I do have some. Oh well. You missed that, buddy. Another fire sprite. Pop him down too. I guess it's above, so I'm gonna quickly freeze this guy here. Throw that. And you'll notice that I can take down champions relatively easily with that. And I'm gonna come up here and take care of these guys here. They are being a very big nuisance. I'll just throw a fireball down, and as you notice, my roaring flames off to the side is also ×2. I can throw my fireball, kind of just let them burn, or I can throw another one and just let them explode. You notice that just kind of this nice little loop of just throwing hammer. So yeah, I think I'm just gonna leave the gameplay going just to kind of give a good example of what's going on. So other than that, if you guys enjoyed the video and you found it very useful, feel free to share with your friends if they're also getting into Destiny and want to understand build crafting a little bit. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy.